told y'all. All right, so did everybody have fun playing Gaga Ball?
We play again next week. I gotta try to be better.
we might make that a reoccurring thing, but maybe not every week.
We're gonna make it in the top 10.
Adrian just wants to make top 10, so.
Hey, Mark, that was fun. Well, we have like.
All right, listen up. Here we go. I got a lot to say and not very much time to say it. So we are continuing through the Jesus Said series, and we're going through the Sermon on the Mount. Last week we talked about anger. We had moved from the Beatitudes into the salt and light. We moved into Christ coming to fulfill the law, that our righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, that Christ fulfilled that for us, but that also means we must obey the law as well. And then, last week we talked about anger, but before we actually talked about anger specifically, we discussed Jesus is pointing out here, and he's going to continue. Man, you snotted all over this microphone.
Ew.
It's sweat. It's sweat.
It's sweat.
No, that was a booger. That was gross. That's okay. Anyway, so Jesus did not have to pick a booger out of the micro. And anyway, he said he started out that next part of the sermon with "You have heard that it was said." And we talked last week about how the Pharisees had changed God's laws. He had changed the Word of God, and it seemed that all that they were focused on was the physical consequences of sin, being that if you're angry with your brother, you'll be liable to judgment. But what Jesus is telling us, remember that when we sin, when I sin, it's not simply an issue of the physical, of what we see. The consequences aren't physical, it's spiritual, it's in the heart. He says even if you have anger in your heart towards your brother, you are liable for hell. 1 John tells us that if you hate your brother, it's as if you've murdered him in your heart. So Jesus is showing us here that sin is deeper than just what you can see. Sin is heart deep. It's who we are. It's our nature. And so it's not just what you do, it's what you think. It's what you say. It's all of you. What we do, all of us. Whether it's just what we think, what we feel, what we do, whatever, is all done before God. And He expects us to do all those things in a way that glorifies Him. So to think well about our brother, to think well and to do well to our brother at the same time. It's thinking and doing. And so we talked about how to actually handle anger. We won't go through that again, but that same theme of you've heard this, but I'm telling you this continues through the sermon and continues into what we're talking about today. So let's dive right in. Move all the way over to the second to last slide. Is that your hurt thumb? No, you used your finger in it. Never mind. Sorry. So there we are. We are in verse 27. Fun passage on lust. It says, you've heard that it was said. Once again, repeating that same phrase. This is what you've heard is true. This is what the Pharisees have been teaching you. You shall not commit adultery. Now, from the context, we would assume then that what the Pharisees were, or the religious leaders were teaching, was simply a physical issue. Just don't commit the physical act of adultery. And then Jesus takes it to the heart. He says, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Go back. So he's talking to his disciples. So he's talking to a bunch of guys. This can obviously be used then also for girls. It's guys and girls. It doesn't matter. The purpose of teaching this is to show that adultery, sexual relations outside of a marriage covenant relationship, is sinful, of course, but even thinking about it is sinful. Well, it's not the same. Consequences are different. But what Jesus is telling us is that we can't ignore it. No matter how much we want to ignore these kinds of things, no matter, like we talked about last week, how we want to hate people in our heart, we want to have bad feelings for people in our heart, no matter how much we want to think about somebody like this in our heart, no matter, and as we move through these other things, we want to do these things, not really behind closed doors, but in our minds, where nobody else can see it, and we think it's okay. Everybody wants to giggle because most people in here are middle schoolers. But the reason you're giggling is because you're all struggling with it. Every one of you. So, through the smiles, you've got to hear this. Because I promise you, if you don't, it's going to affect your future relationships. The ones that actually matter. Not the ones that you guys are doing the dating thing for a week and a half and go, I love him so much, and then they're gone the week later. Not that stuff. I'm talking about a bride or a husband. What you do now will affect that relationship then in your heart. And I know you're not thinking about that right now. But I'm here to tell you right now, you need to. Deal with this problem now. And let me show you how to deal with this problem. Well, here, let me rephrase that. Let Jesus show you how to handle this problem. Move on. Next verse, the rest of the passage. So he says, you've heard it said not to commit adultery. Of course, he's thinking a physical act, but Jesus is saying, look, you can't. It's a heart issue. The same way, it begins in the heart. You don't just decide to commit adultery. One day you go, oh, it'd be good to go sleep with this other person. No, it started in your heart, a desire for somebody else. So God is concerned with the whole issue. And then he gives you a way to deal with not only this kind of an issue, but any kind of issue that has a grip on you. You could think of addictions. You could think of eating, overeating, eating bad, whatever. You could think of continuing to, in other sexual things, maybe homosexual thoughts. You could think of this in terms of any kind of sin that is dominating your life. And I'll consider those who are still laughing as ones who are struggling in these areas. Because it's real. But God gives us a way to handle it. Sure, we need to deal with the heart issue, but there's also there's ways to handle that. It's not just try harder not to think of it. Try harder not to do it in your mind. He actually tells us ways of doing these things. Now, in the context of the adulterous relationship, this is going to be a really easy way to give an example to this. But let's hear what Jesus says first. He says, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. And let me just read real quick over here in Matthew 18. He says that it's another passage where he teaches this same thing, but it adds one more element to it that is important. It says, if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into hell of fire. So he also adds a foot. So we hear hand, eye, and foot. If these things are causing you to sin, cut them out and throw them away. Because it's better that you go to heaven without one of your eyeballs than to burn for all eternity in hell because of your sin. And there you go. I'm just going to stop here, and good luck to you. Have fun with that. Enjoy. What are you going to do now? Hide the knives. Hide your kids. No. That's kind of intense, isn't it? That's kind of strong language, isn't it? I mean, does he really, literally mean cut my eyeball out? Maybe, but I don't think so.
We don't have to blood ourselves.
Right. But here's why he uses this. Did that catch your attention? Cut out your eye? Cut off your hand? If it's going to cause you to sin? Caught your attention, didn't it? That's the purpose. Because in the same way that we talked about last week, that sin is a big deal, Jesus is saying right here, sin is a big deal. Worthy to cut your hands off in order to not do it. It's better to cut your eyeball out than to do it. It's better to cut your foot off than to go to those places.
It's like in Luke when it says it's better for you to like wrap that thing around your neck and throw and drown yourself.
Exactly. It's dramatic language to catch your attention, to help you understand sin is a big deal. And if you don't think sin is a big deal, I would hate for you to spend eternity in hell because you're ignoring this. He uses strong language. He uses dramatic language to catch our attention. I've shared this message before, sort of, actually during the summer, calling it Radical Amputation. If we're going to deal with sin in our life, we've got to cut things out that don't need to be there. And not only the sinful things themselves, learning how to cut those out, put off, remember the process of change, put off and put on something new. This is the putting off part. This is an extreme version of the putting off part. If you're going to cut something off, that's a pretty big deal. So let me tell you 3 things. First thing, you've got to take action. If you're going to deal with sin, what we're learning here, what Jesus is teaching here is there's action to be taken. It's not just let go, let God, and He'll just take the sin away from you. That's not here. Does it say, lay down your hand before the altar of the Lord and let the Lord cut your hand off for you? Does it say that? Of course it doesn't. It says, if your right eye causes you to sin, you tear it out. Get rid of it. Cut your hand off. Cut your foot off. Ouch. This requires action. You must take action. And again, this deals with every kind of situation that is necessary to make these steps. For some things, it's easy for us to just walk away from some sort of certain sin, but for some kinds of sin, this is the action we must take. It's going to have to be extreme. You got to take action. It's not going to happen just by asking God to take it away. The action that you take, like cutting off a hand, it should remind you every time you try to sin again. Every time you go to do that again, you got to look over and go, oh yeah. Or every time you try to take that step towards that place, oh yeah, my foot's gone. And what does that mean? And obviously this is figurative language. So let's use the example that Jesus gave, just because it's easy and everybody's going to giggle anyway, but I don't care. An adulterous relationship. Let's say that you're married, you're not, but think about this. And I'm just use me, just because it's easier, okay? I'm married to Sarah. Let's say that I'm sleeping with somebody else. Okay? Everybody there? Yeah, you're trying not to laugh, and I can see it. Whenever I... obviously, that is a physical act, and it has begun in the heart, but at the same time, this is dealing with the whole situation. So in order for me to cut this off, what do I have to do? Give me some examples. What am I going to have to cut out? Obviously, I got to cut her out. But what else am I going to have to cut out?
Any contact with her.
Any contact with her? Which means what?
Cell phone.
Yeah, get rid of her phone number. What else? Get rid of any reminders of her.
Anything that would lead you to tempt.
Right? If I have a key to her house, yeah, that's got to be gone. A picture of her in my phone or in my wallet, yeah, that's going to have to go. Social media, cut those ties. You got to cut things. You can't play around with it.
You need to physically go and say you're done.
You don't have to go. You don't want to go.
Well, I'm saying, okay, true.
But you do have to cut it off and say it's over, of course. Now, think about this. And I've used this example, but some of you haven't heard it before. Let's say now I'm going to a pastor because I'm dealing with something like this, and I'm seeking help, and I want to deal with it. And I go, Pastor, I've done something terrible. My wife knows about it and everything, but I'm trying hard to overcome this. I know what I've done. What do I do? And he goes, you know what? How often do you see her? Oh, yeah, I don't know. I probably see her 3 times a week. Okay, well, let's do this. Instead of seeing her 3 times this next week, just see her twice. All right, Pastor, next week. I only saw her twice this week, but I still feel bad. I don't know why. Okay, well, how about this week, just see her 1 time? Okay. All right, Pastor, I saw her 1 time. Now what? Now just see her every couple weeks. Now just see her once a month. Now call her on, I don't know, whatever. How does that sound? Stupid?
Waste of time.
Like a waste of time?
Like a 12-step program.
Like an idiot? Really?
Like you need to find a new pastor.
Yeah, you need to find a new pastor.
You go to church.
You know, or here's a better one.
Yeah.
That girl's not good for you. Find a different girl on the side.
Oh, hi.
Wow.
Mark Williams, that's awful.
Think about what... Yes, it's catching your attention, isn't it? Now think of your other sins this way. Listen up. I don't know. Maybe you have... maybe there is an addiction in your life. You know what? Instead of doing that every day, try to cut that down just to 3 times a week. Instead of doing that thing that you do periodically, instead of doing that every day, just do it just a couple times a week. And then just a couple times a month. Then, once every few months. How does that sound? Is that not what we do? Is that not what we do with the things that we're struggling with the most? I know I do. I justify myself. I go, well, if I just wean myself off of this thing, it'll be okay. Instead of taking that knife, or that, probably a knife wouldn't work all that well, maybe a butcher knife or something. Taking a hatchet or chainsaw or something, something. And cutting that off quickly. Instead of doing that, it's having that other kind of method is more like taking that knife or taking that. I don't even like to do this because it makes me feel weird. And going slice by slice by slice by slice by slice by slice.
It's more painful.
That's way more painful, way more problems. All we're doing is hurting ourselves. And again, I'm not talking to you as somebody who's, and I have no problems. I've cut everything out of my life. I'm telling you, as this is somebody who has done this in some ways, but in other ways I'm still slowly cutting things out. And it hurts more than anything, but we still do that. And Jesus is saying, cut it off. Throw it away. It's better that you lose the whole member than you go to hell. And what else does he say here? If your right eye, if your right hand, what are most people? Now there's some lefties in here, but what are most people?
Right-handed.
Right-handed. So for you lefties in here, I don't know how many lefties we got. There's a couple. All right, for you lefties in here, when you read this, think about your left hand, because the point of it is to say your dominant hand, that thing that is so difficult to get out of your life that it would be like cutting off your dominant hand, the hand you do everything with. It's that difficult. And what happens if you cut off your right hand? What's going to happen? Well, I'm not if you're actually. Say that again.
You have to learn to write with your other hand.
You got to learn how to do things different. Again, this is figurative language. So if you cut something out of your life, really cut it out, you're going to have to relearn how to live. Have you seen some of those people who have lost limbs, lost their arms and learned how to play guitar with their feet? And those people are crazy awesome. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. If you're going to deal with some of these kinds of sins, you're going to have to learn to cut things out of your life that are going to make you have to relearn some stuff. Let me give you an example of the weight loss that I've been experiencing. If I've got to cut bad food out of my life, I've got to relearn how to eat. I can't just run over to McDonald's and grab something real quick. I'm going to have to relearn how to find food and get the right stuff and eat cleanly. I'm going to have to think ahead a little bit. Not live moment by moment, which is what the world does. Just live every moment for the moment. You're an idiot. No, think ahead. Be wise. Make decisions that are going to glorify God. Think about it. If you know that where you're about to go is going to have somebody or something there that's going to tempt you in some way, probably best not to go. Or you also know where to guard. All right, I know that if I'm going to this thing that I have to go to, there's a person that I'm just going to have to stay away from. And if I see them coming, I'm going to have to just get away. Or whatever. You know what I mean? You're going to have to relearn how to live. You got to think ahead. Start being a lefty. You're going to have to relearn how to live. So the first thing was we've got to take action. There's got to be real action. The second thing was that action has to be definitive. It's got to be once for all. It's got to be done. You got to relearn how to live now. Amputate it. But remember, in this process of change, when we've talked about putting off something, if you just cut your right hand off, and you just, I guess I'm never going to learn how to write. That stinks. You got to replace it. If you're going to take stuff out of your life, you're going to have to replace it with something else. Back to the example up here. I'm going to cut an adulterous relationship out of my life. What am I going to have to do? Anybody? I'm going to have to learn how to love my wife. The love that I was putting into that relationship, because that's what love is, it's action. And I'm going to have to learn how to love my wife. Think ahead on things that I need to do to show her biblically how to love her. Put things in my life that helps me to make those changes. People, things that I need to help me glorify God with every step, with every thing I put on. And the third thing, first thing was You actually have to do it. Second thing was you got to cut it off quickly. It's got to be definitive. It's got to be one to make it really work. Don't torture yourself. And the third thing is, back to the first thing, you got to take action. We can't just talk about it. Best intentions get nothing done. You got to follow through. There's got to be an action plan. There's got to be confession, repentance, reconciliation, forgiveness for things in your life that need to be taken care of. There's got to be discipline training in the right things to do now. Because you've been disciplining yourself and training yourself be doing the wrong things. Do it. And do it now. Don't wean yourself off like slice by slice. Have you? Alright, I may have told you this story before, but it's funny and gross at the same time. Y'all know meat slicers, right? Like the big ones? Yeah, don't do that. When you clean it, you know you're supposed to wear metal gloves? It's a good idea. If you ever work in a restaurant, wear metal gloves when you're cleaning meat slicer. So I was cleaning the meat slicer one time at Quiznos. I wasn't wearing a metal glove. And I turned it on. So that it would be faster to clean. You clean it faster. Because all you got to do is put the rag there, turn it on, and it'll spin around in itself and just clean itself. Unless you move up just slightly and then you cut the end of your finger off. That was a fun day at Quiznos.
Did it end in anyone's sandwich?
It did not.
Did you get fired?
I did not. I was the supervisor.
So they never listened to you.
It wasn't like the whole end. It was just kind of like the skin part. It didn't go to my nail or anything. Just kind of cut the...
Oh. Did you cry?
Now, I can still feel that. I still have a scar. I'll show you later. It's not that big, but
Please don't.
but here's what I'm saying. I can still feel it. I can... Oh. I'm going to throw up a little bit. Sorry. I'm good. So, what I'm saying is...
It hurt.
Now every time I think about that or I look at this scar and I remember, I'm going, okay, I'm going to wear a metal glove next time I ever have to clean a meat slicer. Which I hope I never do. That's not the point. The point is, it reminded me. And the point is, it also reminded me of if you're trying to take it off slowly, one piece by piece.
Hey, you good, Mark?
Huh?
You good?
I think so.
Dip it in some
No, you're not. You good?
You ate McDonald's.
Wait, it's like blood starting out everywhere and like, oh my god.
So, do it now. All right, listen. Do it now. Don't wean yourself off of it. If you need help, again, I'm here for you. I can counsel you. I can give you some guidance in these areas. What things need to be cut out of your life? What things need to be replaced to help you to grow and to mature as a believer? I'm not telling you these things as someone who's saying, if you're struggling with something like this, you're lesser of a Christian. What I'm saying is every Christian deals with stuff like this. And every Christian must, at some point in their life, go through this process. And it is a difficult process. But it's possible. And you have people in your life, in the church, that will help you walk through it. Because we've been through it too. There's no shame or guilt. Sure, there's guilt because there's sin, but you're not going to get that from me. I want to help you because I've been where you've been. I've gone through what you're going through. I understand, and I'm going to love you through it. I'm going to help you through it. Because here's the thing. Whether you do it or not, you still have grace. You still have the Lord Jesus Christ who has taken your place and lived perfectly in your place. So you're not doing this to kind of earn some sort of favor with God. You're doing this because God has already given you everything you need in Him to do it. So do it. Do it now. Whatever that thing in your life is. I'm going to ask the praise team to come up and we're going to do a song.